Beneath the ocean's stunning surface lies a world of hidden perils. Invisible currents can pull even expert swimmers into the depths, while sudden weather changes turn calm waters deadly. Venomous creatures and disorienting depths await the unwary. The ocean's beauty is matched only by its brutality. Respect it or risk becoming its next victim. Here are 6 gripping stories. The sun was scorching the waters around the Florida Keys in the summer of 2011. Shimmering turquoise waves revealed many marine life and colorful coral reefs beneath them. A tech startup named Aquatech Innovations had found the ideal testing ground in this area, which is renowned for its biodiversity and natural beauty. Intending to transform ocean research, the team was developing an advanced underwater drone for marine exploration. The Nautilus X drone's sleek design allowed it to fit through even the smallest underwater cracks. It was outfitted with high-definition cameras and sonar capabilities. The Aquatech Group departed from a tiny marina near Key Largo under the direction of its founder and engineer, Alistair Graves. For this inaugural journey, Alistair, a man renowned for his attention to detail and commitment to the project, had personally chosen a small crew. Among them was Priya Kaul, the drone's chief programmer, a determined and astute woman who had spent many hours honing Nautilus X's software. Isaac Ike Whelan, an ex-Navy diver supervising the drone deployment and retrieval, was beside her. Lastly, there was Leo Patch Patchett, the younger intern who had been brought along to help with the technical equipment. Marine scientists flocked to the Florida Keys because if the test were successful, the Nautilus X could be used to track marine life, monitor the health of coral ecosystems, and even support underwater archaeology. As the crew prepared for the test, a small research vessel floated serenely on the waves. Ike gave Alistair the go-ahead after carefully lowering the drone into the water and checking the apparatus one final time. As the drone flickered to life, Alistair's hands lit up the control tablet, and the camera feed streamed straight to the tablet. Priya bent over the screen, gazing at the beautiful footage of colorful fish darting between the coral formations, as the drone skimmed across the crystal-clear water. Everything proceeded as planned until something appeared on the drone's sonar edge. Priya squinted at the screen as she tilted her head. Something big, too big to be a fish, was moving in the distance. Observing her hesitancy, Alistair wondered what it might be. Priya quickly changed the camera's angle, her fingers flying over the controls. As the image became more focused, it showed a huge silhouette moving swiftly through the water. At least 10 feet long, it was a bull shark. Alistair's forehead wrinkled. As if assessing the drone, the shark circled it once, then twice. It moved deliberately in a menacing manner, getting closer to the drone's sleek body with each pass. The tension mounted back on the boat. Priya's hands hovered hesitantly over the controls, unsure if she should move the drone away or continue recording. Alistair's attention was fixed on the sonar, which showed the shark's proximity. Ike, who was normally calm under pressure, slid to the side of the boat and looked out for the predator. The shark accelerated abruptly and without warning. Nautilus X was flung through the water as its massive body struck the drone, sending the feed into a disorienting spiral. The group gasped as the drone's camera recorded a frantic jumble of thrashing fins and bubbles. The shark misinterpreted the drone as a threat, or worse, as prey. Again, the shark circled and the boat gave way a little, except this time it was now focused on the boat instead of the drone. The big dorsal fin sliced through the water a few feet from the hull, and Ike cursed under his breath. The shark struck the side of the boat with such force that everyone was stumbling to find balance before anyone could react. The impact threw Patch off balance. His hand slipped on the damp deck as he tried to hold on to something, and before anyone could intervene, he fell over the rail and splashed into the water. An instant of panic struck. Leaping to the boat's edge, Priya gasped and looked fearfully into the water, searching for Patch. Alistair gave a loud command, but the noise of the shark thrashing around overpowered him. Ike lunged into the water, yelling for Patch to hold on as he instinctively reached for a life preserver. Patch came to the surface, coughing and sputtering, his eyes wide with fear as he saw the shark fin slicing through the water a few yards away. The drone, which was still in operation, recorded every moment of the nightmare as it happened. Now ultimately charged, the shark circled nearer its sleek body, slicing through the water with lethal accuracy. Ike plunged headfirst into the water, moving faster than anyone imagined. He swam toward Patch, who was desperately attempting to reach the life preserver, and his years of diving experience kicked in. The shark turned its enormous head toward them, as if sensing the disturbance. Alistair and Priya scrambled to divert the shark's attention to the boat. Thinking fast, Priya turned on the drone's thrusters to full force, sending it hurtling through the water to scare the shark away. The gambit appeared to work momentarily. The drone shot past, and the shark veered off course, chasing after it. Just as the shark veered back toward them, Ike reached Patch. With a strong kick, he seized Patch's arm and propelled them toward the life preserver. Priya and Alistair, gripping the rope with all their strength, pulled them in swiftly, working together to get them to safety before the shark could strike again. A final circle before vanishing into the depths, the shark slowed its approach, possibly confused by the sudden flurry of movement. Ike and Patch collapsed in a heap as they stumbled back onto the deck, gasping for air. The slap of waves against the hull was the only sound audible to the stunned team as they sat there. The drone, which was amazingly unharmed, drifted back toward the boat while its camera recorded the last seconds of the ordeal. They finally escaped unscathed as the shark retreated into the depths. In the following days, footage from Nautilus X made headlines, but the Aquatech Innovations team focused more on the valuable lesson they had learned from the encounter. Even with its stunning beauty, the ocean remained an uncharted and untamed place where the power of nature outshone even the most sophisticated technology. A portion of the Mediterranean Sea between the coasts of Greece and Italy served as the backdrop in 2009. A yacht named the Anaximander belonged to an extraordinarily rich shipping magnate. The showy vessel had a sleek design, and its glossy hull slicing through the water like a knife attracted attention in every harbor. Ignorant of the peril beneath them, a group of wealthy, carefree, and sun-kissed passengers on board relished their cruise through the clear waters. With the island of Zakynthos disappearing behind them, the yacht glided smoothly through the calm seas. The waters gleamed a deep sapphire blue as the Mediterranean sun beat down from a cloudless sky. Viviana Cortell, an Italian heiress, whose remarkable beauty only served to contrast her aloofness, and Gaspard Devereaux, an eccentric French art collector, were two of the group's notable members. Elodie, a former model with a reputation for being both charming and completely ruthless, was married to Marius Kohl, a German tech entrepreneur who made his fortune in digital finance. The yacht's crew catered to their every need, ensuring that the trip remained luxury and extravagance under Captain Leontios Markos, an experienced Greek sailor who had spent more years at sea than most of his passengers. But things turned sinister when a young deckhand named Thanasis noticed something strange in the water. When the yacht sliced through the water, it was just a slow, purposeful shadow below the surface. None of the other crew members gave it much thought when Thanasis mentioned it. The passengers had already witnessed schools of fish and dolphins darting alongside the boat. The Mediterranean was renowned for its diverse marine life. But as anticipated, the shadow did not vanish. It persisted, and it was evident that this was no common marine animal as the yacht slowed for a leisurely afternoon of swimming and tanning. The shadow moved with a predatory grace that made Thanasis shudder. It was enormous, easily the size of a small car. Captain Markos glanced through his binoculars after he told him. It was enough for him to identify the distinctive silhouette of a great white shark, without being a marine biologist. To calm the passengers, Markos first kept his observation to himself. Though uncommon, the shark was a sight in these waters. It was probably just passing through and indifferent to the yacht. At least, that was his assumption. The yacht anchored in a quiet cove between two rocky outcroppings by late afternoon. The water was inviting a turquoise mirror that shimmered and reflected the brilliant sky above. Marius Kohl was among the travelers who had seized the chance to go swimming, not realizing that a silent predator was waiting just below the surface. The atmosphere didn't drastically change until Viviana Cortell, lounging on the deck's edge, dipped her foot into the water. The shark snapped to attention. Its dorsal fin sliced through the water like a blade as it charged toward the yacht with terrifying speed. Moments after they had started laughing and chatting, everyone on deck stopped and stared at the menacing figure encircling the boat. While the shark fin closed in behind him, Marius started swimming back toward the yacht while still in the water. His strokes were becoming more erratic. Sensing the danger, Captain Marcos barked orders to the crew. Moments later, the shark rammed the yacht with a force that jolted everyone. Reacting quickly, the crew pulled Marius from the water just in time. Though not strong enough to destroy the boat, the impact warned them of the potential danger beneath them. The sight of a real shark had previously made the passengers laugh, but now a nagging fear was holding them. The shark persisted in its attack, far from being discouraged. It circled the yacht relentlessly, its massive body occasionally brushing against the hull as if testing it. Occasionally it would dart toward the surface, snapping its jaws at anything that came near the water, whether it be a piece of debris or the shadow of a crew member leaning over the railing. The passengers could do nothing but watch in horror. Gaspard Devereaux, ever the curious type, suggested that perhaps the shark was just intrigued by the boat's shiny surface or the unusual noise of the engine. But Captain Marcos knew better. This wasn't curiosity. The shark was hunting. Viviana, who had remained unnervingly calm throughout the ordeal, began to ask about the yacht's emergency protocols. No one else seemed willing to raise this question, but it was on everyone's mind. The nearest port was at least 40 nautical miles away, and though the yacht was equipped with modern communication devices, summoning help seemed futile. When a rescue boat arrived, the shark could have easily breached the lower deck or caused enough damage to leave them stranded. The situation grew more desperate as the hours dragged on. The shark did not appear to be going anywhere, and the passengers became agitated. Elodie, usually the epitome of calm, paced the deck uneasily, her gaze darting from the water to the far horizon. Captain Marcos rejected Marius's suggestion to outrun the shark by reactivating the engines. The yacht wasn't designed for speed, and if the shark senses panic, it might launch a more forceful attack. The tension aboard mounted to a boiling point as night fell. Still circling, the shark grew even more hostile in the shadow of the night. Now and then its body broke the surface, its appearance more terrifying than the last, as the lights on the yacht illuminated it. Although the crew made every effort to maintain everyone's composure, it was obvious that things were becoming more dangerous by the minute. After much thought, Captain Marcos used the yacht's emergency flare gun. He planned to frighten the shark away with loud noises and intense light bursts. It was a long shot, but they had few other options. With the passengers huddled in the main cabin, Marcos and Thanasis loaded the flare gun and aimed it at the water. The first flare shot into the air with a loud hiss, bathing the surrounding waters in a brilliant red glow. It appeared to function for a brief while. The shark vanished from view as it dove far below the surface. A collective sigh of relief spread through the yacht, but the relief was short-lived. Minutes later, the shark returned with renewed fury. It slammed into the yacht's stern, sending a shudder through the entire vessel. The crew scrambled to secure loose items, and the passengers clung to whatever they could to avoid being thrown off balance. The shark attacks were more frequent and now more violent. Captain Marcos ordered the crew to prepare the yacht's small dinghy as a last resort. It was a risky plan, but they thought that if the shark concentrated all its attention on the larger boat, it might miss the smaller, quieter one. In addition to Thanasis, the crew's strongest rowers, Gaspard Devereaux and Viviana Cortel, offered to take the dinghy. The shark kept attacking the yacht while the dinghy lowered into the water. While Gaspard and Thanasis rowed as silently as they could, the passengers and crew held their breath as the small boat drifted away from the yacht. It looked like they would survive for a little while. However, the shark's focus shifted to the dinghy at that point. Chaos erupted in the following moments. With enormous jaws that snapped mere inches from the side, the shark leaped at the small boat. Thanasis, acting quickly, fired the flare gun into the water. The bright flash momentarily disoriented the shark, giving the dinghy enough time to escape. By morning, the battered yacht remained afloat, reaching the nearest port. Having lost interest in its pursuit, the shark disappeared into the depths. Eventually, the yacht reached the safety of the harbor. The passengers' opulent Mediterranean vacation turned nightmare-ended as they quietly disembarked, shaken but alive and unhurt. The terror of that night would never leave any of them, how the tranquil waters of the Mediterranean had turned into a hunting ground, and how significantly near they had come to becoming its next victims. An experienced British scuba diver named Graham Whitlock was heading into what he thought would be a routine solo dive in the Gulf of Thailand in the summer of 2012. Divers were familiar with the site, Koh Tao, a small island in southern Thailand known for its colorful coral reefs and abundant marine life. Numerous species, including different kinds of reef sharks, called this underwater paradise home. Graham had been scuba diving for years in places as diverse as the Caribbean's pristine waters and the frigid, dark depths of the North Sea. He was well versed in the dangers and benefits of delving into the ocean, having completed over 1,000 dives. He set up his gear on a small fishing boat close to Shark Island, a rocky outcrop well known for its diverse marine life. After ensuring his oxygen tank was full and his camera rig was fastened, he slipped into the warm, tropical water. At first, the descent was quiet. Graham saw schools of vividly colored fish darting in and out of the coral as he dove deeper into the underwater paradise. He moved slowly, adjusting his buoyancy to glide effortlessly through the water. His mission was simple: to capture photographs of the reef's delicate ecosystem, something he had done countless times before. 30 minutes into the dive, Graham found himself near the base of a coral wall. The visibility was excellent, and he could see several meters in every direction. As he hovered near a vibrant patch of staghorn coral, he spotted the unmistakable silhouette of a black-tip reef shark in the distance. At first, the shark seemed indifferent to his presence, swimming lazily around the coral structures. Graham knew reef sharks, particularly blacktips, were generally harmless if left alone. They were curious creatures, but their territorial instincts could be triggered if they felt threatened. He kept his distance, observing the shark through the lens of his camera. The creature was stunning, its sleek body cutting through the water with an elegance that only nature could design. However, as he continued photographing the coral and marine life, Graham noticed that the shark had started to circle him. Sharks weren't unusual to exhibit such behavior, but something about how it moved put him on edge. The circles became tighter and the shark's movements became more deliberate. Graham's breathing quickened as he realized the shark wasn't just curious. It was sizing him up. His training kicked in. He knew that panicking would only worsen the situation, so he tried to calm down and avoid abrupt movements that would agitate the animal. He slowed his breathing. Still, the shark circled menacingly, its black eyes focused on him. The once serene underwater world now felt claustrophobic, and the silence was broken only by the steady hiss of his regulator. At that critical moment, Graham made a fatal mistake. The flash suddenly went off as he adjusted his camera for another shot. The burst of light transformed the shark's demeanor instantly, shifting from curious to aggressive. The creature exhibited unpredictable behavior, darting rapidly in Graham's direction. As it swam by, the shark skimmed Graham's leg with its dorsal fin. His heart raced. He resisted the urge to lash out in terror, understanding that any abrupt movement might set off a full-blown assault. The shark circled again, this time closer. Graham could see the rows of sharp teeth as it passed within arm's reach. He was still far below the surface, and his oxygen tank was almost empty. Worse yet, the shark blocked his most direct route back to the boat. There was not much time left. Graham knew he had to act quickly, but rash decisions could be deadly. He scanned the sea floor for any potential cover, spotting a large rock formation a few meters away. Careful not to set off the shark's predatory instincts, he approached it slowly but steadily. The shark kept circling without taking its eyes off of him. Graham reached the rock and positioned his body so the formation stood between him and the shark. This gave him a brief moment of calm, enabling him to collect his thoughts. He looked at his oxygen level and realized he was down to less than 5 minutes. He would need to make his ascent soon, but the shark was still hovering nearby, clearly agitated. His only option was to distract it long enough to make his escape. Graham was carrying a small dive knife, not for combat, but as a tool for cutting through coral or fishing nets. He didn't intend to use it on the shark, but figured the metallic glint might catch the animal's attention. Carefully, he drew the knife from its sheath and angled it to reflect the sunlight filtering from the surface. The gamble worked. The shark, momentarily mesmerized by the flashing light, paused its circling. Seizing the opportunity, Graham began his ascent, moving slowly but deliberately toward the surface. He kept his eyes on the shark, ready to defend himself if it charged again. But the shark appeared more drawn to the light than to Graham. Graham struggled to control his breathing and hold on to the little oxygen he had left, and as he ascended, his lungs burned. Even though it seemed like a long way off, he couldn't afford to rush and run the risk of getting decompression sickness. The shark trailed after him briefly before giving up and disappearing into the ocean. Graham broke through the surface and gasped, relief washing over him. He made a frantic signal to the boat, and a Thai boatman waiting anxiously for his return hauled him back on board in a matter of minutes. Now that he was back on solid ground, Graham felt thankful, yet shaken. Even for an experienced individual like him, the experience served as a sobering reminder of the unpredictable nature of the natural world. For weeks afterward, he was plagued by the vision of the shark's black eyes glaring down at him from the Gulf's depths. But as time went on, he began to see the incident not as a near-death experience, but rather as a sobering lesson in respect. Respect for the ocean and its creatures. Years would pass after that day when Graham would still not return to Koh Tao to dive. He would always remember that shark circling him in the depths. Cape Cod, a charming peninsula that juts out from Massachusetts into the Atlantic Ocean, was as picturesque and mysterious as ever in the summer of 2013. Both locals and visitors found refuge on Cape Cod, well known for its quiet charm, sandy beaches, and the occasional sighting of sharks. In addition to being famous for its lighthouses and gently sloping dunes, Chatham, a small town on the southeast tip, had a reputation for something much more frightening. A growing number of sharks were known to be patrolling the nearby waters. This ocean was deep, icy, and brimming with life. Caleb Blake arrived in Cape Cod that summer seeking excitement. A 29-year-old thrill-seeker from Vermont, he had always been drawn to the ocean depths, though he was neither a sailor nor a marine biologist. He was more impulsive in his interests and driven by a need to experience an adrenaline rush. He was searching for experience rather than numbers. For the week, he had rented a small beach house in Chatham, hoping to get away from his routine life back in the mountains and go surfing. On a paddleboard, no less. Caleb decided to walk far beyond the outer beach on a crisp morning past the seal colonies that frequently drew larger predators. He confidently paddled, but loneliness swept him away as he glided farther away from the coast. His paddle breaking the water occasionally made the only sound, and the beach was a far-off strip of tan. The first indication of trouble appeared, followed by an odd ripple in the water some 20 yards ahead of him. Caleb didn't give it any attention initially, assuming it was just a curious seal or a school of fish, but he noticed it as soon as he dipped his paddle once more. Like a ghost emerging from the depths, the dorsal fin was visible and easily moved through the water. With his heart racing in his chest, Caleb went utterly still. The fin was big, incredibly smooth, and moved with terrifying accuracy. He knew this wasn't just any shark because he'd watched enough documentaries. It was the fastest shark in the ocean, a mako. In these waters, their kind was uncommon but not unheard of. With its torpedo-shaped body meant to pursue prey in short, violent bursts, the creature was built for speed, and it was going directly in his direction. Caleb calmly started to paddle back toward the shore instinctively, trying to convince himself that the shark was just curious and not hunting. The water surrounding the fin, however, churned more violently as it got bigger and closer. The mako had a straight course. When he became aware that he was now the prey and not just an observer of marine life, fear overcame him. He could feel the shark closing in on him, so he started to paddle frantically, sending water splashes behind him with every stroke. Still, the shore was too far away and nowhere to hide in the open sea. He glanced back just as the mako's fin disappeared beneath the surface. That was the worst part, the not knowing. With just a fiberglass board and a flimsy paddle for protection, Caleb was completely exposed to the shark's deadly speed. Caleb desperately turned sharply to the left, hoping to deflect the predator's approach. The water went eerily still for a moment. The shark was no more. His eyes darted in all directions as he slowed and gasped for air. Suddenly, he felt the board buck beneath him violently at that point, almost sending him plummeting into the abyss. After striking, the mako tested its victim. Caleb clung to the board because he couldn't survive in the water. With the paddle as his sole weapon, he was helpless against such a formidable foe. But it was all he had. As he waited for the next blow, he scanned the water. The shark was once again in his circle, measuring him before making the kill. He decided what to do because he knew he had no chance in the open water. Attempting to disorient the shark and make himself a more elusive target, he started zigzagging instead of heading straight toward the coast. Whenever the Mako approached, Caleb would abruptly alter its course, causing the shark to modify its angle of attack. Hours seemed to last for minutes at times. Though his arms were burning and his mind was racing, he could finally see the shore in detail. He was very, very close. The shark, though, still needed to be finished. In one final terrifying lunge, the Mako surged from the water, its sleek body breaching the surface as its jaws snapped shut just inches from Caleb's board. The impact sent a spray of water over him, and for a horrifying second he thought he was going to be pulled under. Nonetheless, the board decided to hold. The shark darted off, vanishing into the deep blue, maybe realizing the effort was not worth it. Drenched in sweat and salt water, Caleb paddled until his feet touched the sandy bottom close to the shore. His body quivered from fear and adrenaline as he collapsed onto the sand, gasping for breath. Caleb could not get the encounter out of his head in the following weeks. Once a place of wonder, the ocean had become something far more sinister. He left Chatham earlier than planned, returning to his hometown with a story that few believed, but was one that he would carry for the rest of his life. The thrill-seeker had found his adventure, but it had come at a cost. His innocence about the natural world was gone, replaced by a profound respect for the creatures that ruled the deep. In the summer of 2010, the turquoise waters of the Yucatan Peninsula glistened under the midday sun. The Gulf of Mexico, a haven for spearfishers, was renowned for its abundant marine life. Teodoro Pinot, a seasoned spearfisher, knew these waters better than most as he was drawn to the sea from an early age, having grown up in Progreso, a small town on the Gulf Coast. On this specific dive trip, Teodoro was joined by his cousin, Daviel Solis, a less seasoned diver who stayed nearer the boat while Teodoro went further out. The damp air clung to their skin as they set up their gear. It was the ideal day for spearfishing, with perfect visibility and unusually calm water. Teodoro set out to catch a large grouper expected to fetch a high price at the nearby market. Soon after, he noticed one skulking close to a coral outcrop about 30 feet below the surface. With the spear gun by his side, his body moved gracefully through the water with practice. Teodoro's aim was spot on, even though it briefly flailed violently. He owned that grouper. When the blood started contaminating the water, he reeled in the fish and felt uneasy. He was aware of the dangers of spearfishing because blood in the water served as a shark magnet. His gaze whipped around, taking in the surrounding ocean. At first, it appeared calm and unspoiled, the serene beauty of the underwater world. However, out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of the distinct outline of a tiger shark, leisurely cruising through the distance. With ease, the shark's length measured 12 feet. With a terrifying grace, its broad, striped body moved like a predator created over millions of years of evolution. Teodoro felt fear sweep over him, and his spear tightened. He was still 30 feet below the surface, and the shark was closing in. Teodoro had faced sharks before, but this time it was different. He knew he had two options: hold on and get ready to defend himself, or drop his catch, hoping the shark would focus on the injured fish. He valued his life more than the fish despite its value. After a brief period of indecision, he chose. He released the grouper and observed it gradually descend, leaving a blood trail behind it. His heart pounded in his chest as he began his ascent, keeping his eyes locked on the shark. The grouper did not pique the predator's interest, but he caught their attention. The shark started to move more quickly, its enormous body slicing through the water at an incredible speed. The shark was getting closer to Teodoro, still a few feet below the surface. His only weapon was his spear gun, made for fish, not an animal this big. It was all he had, though still. Teodoro angled his body downward and pointed the spear gun at the charging shark. He knew he had only one shot. With its jaws slightly open to show off its rows of razor-sharp teeth, the shark's black eyes were fixed on him. Teodoro made the trigger pull. The spear protruded and hit the shark slightly below its dorsal fin. The creature flinched back, writhing wildly from the spear's sting. For a moment, Teodoro thought he might have scared it off, but then the shark turned more enraged than before. Once more it approached him more quickly. Teodoro kicked hard, pushing himself toward the surface without reloading. Although the boat wasn't far away, it seemed to take forever for his head to appear above the water. Gasping for air, he shouted for Davil, who was already on high alert after seeing the commotion below. Davil scrambled to start the boat's engine, hastily pulling the anchor up. With the shark still circling below, Teodoro swam as hard as he could. Davil reached the side of the boat and pulled him in as the shark's dorsal fin broke the surface a few feet away. The two men sat there, catching their breath for a moment. The enormous shark hovered close to the boat, its bulk casting its shadow below the surface. Once again the water was eerily calm, and just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished back into the depths. Teodoro reclined, his heart still pounding and his adrenaline gradually wearing off. Although he had lost the grouper, he had made it through. In the ensuing weeks, Teodoro returned to the waters off Progreso with a newfound respect for the predators that lived in the deep. He resolved never to take the serene beauty of the ocean for granted. He continued to fish, keeping one eye on the horizon, watching for the telltale shadow that could appear at any moment, reminding him of the thin line between hunter and hunted. Two buddies decided to kayak fishing in the Gulf of Mexico one evening in the summer of 2008. Fishermen from all over the world come to the Gulf of Mexico because of its warm waters, which run the entire length of the southern coast of the United States. Not much had changed this evening just off the Texas coast of Corpus Christi. Francis Frank Wainwright and Boaz Holt had been planning this trip for weeks. Together, the open sea, the unknown that lay beneath, and nighttime fishing provided them with an exhilarating experience. Growing up in a small seaside town, Francis and Boaz have been best friends since they were young. Knowing these waters well, Francis was the more reserved of the two and a seasoned fisherman. On the other hand, Boaz was more adventurous, often pushing the limits and loving the rush that came with it. When they cast their lines, the two men spaced their kayaks roughly 200 feet apart and allowed the current to push them gently. Aside from the occasional splash of a fish breaching the surface and the distant hum of a boat engine, the night was quiet. For a while, it seemed like just another peaceful night. After several hours, Francis felt a strong pull on his line. His muscles stiffened when he brought the catch in, and the rod bent from the strain. Something large and fierce was fighting on the other end. Boaz paddled over to assist after noticing Francis's kayak swaying. Eager to land a huge fish, the two collaborated as they worked. After a few minutes of struggle, the fish, a big flailing snapper, finally broke the surface. Though it was a satisfying catch, the splash caused a ripple effect in the water. To their surprise, another creature was observing from below. Boaz was drawn to a dark figure moving beneath the surface as Francis secured the snapper in a cooler strapped to his kayak. He initially believed it to be just another fish, but as the shape went beneath his kayak, he became aware of how much bigger it was. The distinct outline of a dorsal fin slicing through the water about 20 feet away made his heart race. It was a great white shark. The smell of the freshly caught fish drew the shark, who started to circle their kayak. Francis was also aware of it, his heart racing as the enormous predator slid soundlessly below the surface. The men stood there for a moment, not knowing how to proceed. Only fishing rods, a knife, and paddles provided real protection. The water, which had seemed so calm and inviting earlier, now felt like a trap. The shark circled closer, its movements deliberate and slow, almost as if it were sizing them up. Then, without warning, it bumped Boaz's kayak's side, with a force nearly knocking him into the water. Boaz's breath came in short, panicked bursts as his arms flailed in an attempt to steady himself. The shark was putting them to the test, not just being inquisitive. Trying to prevent his friend from capsizing, Francis paddled quickly toward Boaz. Boaz stayed upright despite the kayak's wobbling, which was dangerous. Both men were aware of the grave danger they faced. Because of the darkness, they could not see where the shark would strike next and failed to outpace it. The shark circled again, this time grazing Francis's kayak underbelly. Even though it wasn't as strong, the impact was still enough to give him a chill. Quick action was required. Finding a means to get away from the shark before it decided to launch a full-scale attack was imperative, as it was growing increasingly hostile. Francis and Boaz scrambled to devise a plan for the situation to worsen by the moment, and there was no visibility. The fish in the cooler was drawing in sharks, so they knew they had to take it out. However, discarding it could merely agitate the predator even more. Nevertheless, they were at a loss for options. Francis rushed into the cooler and tossed the snapper overboard, hoping the shark would take the bait and lose interest in them. Its powerful body cut through the water like a torpedo, and the shark quickly darted toward the fish. For a moment it seemed their plan had worked. After being bit, the snapper was forcefully thrashed in the shark's jaws. After that, though, it returned its focus to the kayaks. Panic flared. They began paddling toward the shore with all their strength, their arms burning as they tried to distance themselves from the shark. The predator followed closely, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a shadow. As they neared the shallower waters, something changed. The shark slowed its pursuit, its fin dipping beneath the surface before disappearing entirely. The men stopped paddling within a few hundred yards of the shore, where the water was too shallow for the shark to follow. They were so exhausted and adrenaline-charged that they collapsed on the beach, gasping for air and trembling in their arms and legs. The sight of the massive shark, the feeling of helplessness in the dark water, and the sheer terror of almost being capsized stayed with them. For weeks, Francis and Boaz were haunted by memories of that night. Though they continued fishing, they never returned to open-water kayaks. The Gulf of Mexico, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, now seemed more dangerous than ever, a stark reminder of the thin line between predator and prey. Their encounter with the great white had profoundly changed their view of the vast, unpredictable sea.